Welcome to this week's edition of Outdoors Online, a weekly webcast produced by the North Dakota Game and Fish Department. I'm your host, Tom Jensen. My guest this week is Fred Reichman. Fred is the Aquatic Nuisance Species Coordinator for Game and Fish. Fred, first of all, what are ANS, or Aquatic Nuisance Species?
Well, aquatic nuisance species are invasives not native to North Dakota and species that can cause a lot of problems if they get introduced into the state. So there's some invasives that come into the state that are not problems. We're concerned about those that could be once they get here.
There are several species that are threatening to invade right now. Let's talk about those first. The biggest problem, and the one that is getting the most attention right now, is zebra mussels. What are they and where do they come from?
Yeah, zebra mussel are little fingernail-sized mussels. They have come into the Great Lakes area from Asia, Europe with ballast water. They've been really abundant in the Great Lakes. They've moved to another number of water bodies from there, and they're knocking at our doorstep right on the Red River at Wahpeton. Minnesota has them in the Otter Tail River chain. It dumps into the Red River there at Wahpeton, and there's a lot of zebra mussel in that watershed in Minnesota, and we've gotten a few veligers, or the larval stages, drifting downstream into North Dakota for the past several years. I think they've been drifting in every year.
How much damage can they do if they get into North Dakota?
Well, it's interesting. We don't think the Red River is especially good habitat for them, but I think they'll do okay in places. The mussel itself has caused a lot of economic damage to water intake pipes and treatment facilities, industrial power plants. It's caused millions of dollars worth of damage in those kinds of industries, and especially those that use water. They plug pipes because they grow so abundant. From a resource standpoint, ecologically, we certainly don't want them, but it's questionable about how much damage they'd actually do in the Red River.
They're sneaky too. They're transported in some very not unusual ways, but
right. As veligers they're called, they're microscopic, and so you simply can't see them. So at any time you transfer water or transport water out of a lake that has veligers in it, or zebra mussel veligers, they can accompany you, so you can't see them. So they're not like a curly-leaf pondweed or the adults where they're fingernail size. You see them as larval stages, you just don't see them, and so you can move them without actually knowing it.
That makes it very important that people clean their boats, clean any method of transportation that they may find. People need to follow the rules and regulations.
But it's our regulation to get rid of all water. You have to drain water and remove all standing water. That's primarily because of zebra mussel veligers, and unfortunately they seem to be most abundant. Minnesota is documented during the early July, 4th of July weekend seems to be a peak of abundance for those. So unfortunately their abundance matches the peak of use typically in the summertime.
Another species that is threatening to invade, or actually is already here, we found the species in the James River, I believe, and that's silver carp.
Silver carp, yeah. Then the really high flow event in 2011, high flow in the James River all summer long. They moved up out of South Dakota. They were actually in the Missouri River, the mouth of the James, moved into the James River prior to 2011, but in 2011 there was enough flow for long enough. They came all the way up, jumped the dam at Lake Lemoore, or at Lemoore Dam on the James River, moved up, and are actually right in the Jamestown area, right in town of Jamestown. We've got a number of adults. We haven't seen any reproduction or recruitment yet. What moved up seems to be all 2009 year class, and hopefully we can keep them confined to a few adults in the James River.
What would happen if these things got into, say, the Missouri River system?
Well, again, silver carp jump and are physically damaging to people that are out recreating, so it causes a lot of problems in places. The other thing is they are extremely prolific, and Illinois River, again, is a poster child for silver carp. There's just literally tens of thousands of them. They're everywhere. If you drive up and down with a boat, you can just see them, the video, YouTube them. They're just all over the place, and as such, they really take over. There's places where they've invaded that are well over 90% of the fish population is simply silver carp. There's nothing else left.
There are some other species that are already here. They've shown documentation. Let's talk about those for a minute, Fred. Things like curly-leaf pondweed, Eurasian milfoil, and the like.
Yeah, there's some plants that are of concern to us, those two you just mentioned in particular. Eurasian water milfoil is an interesting one. We had it in the Cheyenne River, in Lake Ashtabula, Dead Colt Creek. Populations seem to be really down. We haven't even documented any in North Dakota the last couple of years, and so we certainly aren't thinking that it's been excluded, but there certainly aren't, it isn't causing us any problems because we just haven't even been able to find it. Curly leaf pondweed's an interesting one. There's a number of water bodies that have curly leaf. The Missouri River system is pretty abundant. The Garrison Reach from the dam down to the Bismarck area. It's interesting. We used to be in Oahe, but we haven't documented it for the last several years. The unfortunate thing last year is we documented an extensive stand of curly leaf pondweed at Raleigh Reservoir down in Grant County, and that was certainly unfortunate. I assume that that population got moved by some boater or some recreationalist from the Missouri River system down to Raleigh, and that's not good. So we really encourage people to make sure that they clean all plant fragments off of their boats, trailers, and other equipment.
Right, that was my next question, Fred. What can people do? What do people have to do to keep from spreading these aquatic nuisance species?
All right, again, we have regulations that you have to drain all the water, again, primarily for zebra mussels, but for everything else that might be accompanying in that water for aquatic nuisance species that we don't want.
Now, by draining water, you're talking about live wells, you're talking about bait for the most part, draining hulls, everything.
Drain everything, yeah. Pull your drain plug for sure to drain all the bilge water. Your live wells have to be drained. You cannot transport bait in your live wells. The only way you can transport live aquatic baits is in a container that holds less than 5 gallons or 5 gallons or less of water, and that has to be free of vegetation. All the vegetation on your trailer, the bunks, the rollers, the wheels, everything that could be pulling vegetation up. Props, of course, or lower units are really good places for that stuff to accumulate. That all has to be removed.
A lot of things you just talked about, Fred, in the past they've been suggestions. Now it's the law.
Right. It was always a good idea, and certainly people were encouraged for many years to make sure that they didn't transport anything. ANS has gotten to be really popular in the last, or emerging issue, I guess, in the last 10 years. And several years ago we made these recommendations actually part of our rules now. So you have to pull the drain plugs, you have to drain all the water, you have to clean off all the vegetation. It's a good idea, but not just a good idea. It's the regulations, it's the rules now.
Right, and we're not the only state that's doing it. We're surrounded by every other state is
right.
responding.
Yeah, our regulations are very similar to a number of other states. Actually, South Dakota just imposed some stiffer ANS regulations. Province of Manitoba just implemented some new regulations. Nebraska just got some new regulations and some funding program, funding to establish a program for AIS. So there's a number of adjoining areas and states that are working on better control of aquatic nuisance species.
We just need to be diligent.
We just need to be diligent. So far, we've done really well. Again, I wish we wouldn't have a curly leaf in Raleigh Reservoir, but I think our anglers and our fishermen, our water-based recreationists are doing a pretty good job. We want to just make sure that they continue to do so.
All right, thanks, Fred. As long as we're talking about open water fishing, we should remind you about boat registrations. If you purchased a new boat over the winter, you need to get it registered with the Game and Fish Department. For your convenience, you can register online and generate a 10-day temporary permit that's valid until the registration is processed. If you purchased a used boat from an individual, make sure you have proof of transfer of ownership, such as a photocopy of the previous owner's registration card, a canceled check, or a signed note from the previous owner stating the transfer of ownership. You can print out a registration form from the Game and Fish website at gf.nd.gov, mail that in with the proper fee and proof of ownership, or you can stop by the Game and Fish headquarters in Bismarck and take care of your paperwork. And here's another reminder, you need a new fishing license on April 1st. You can take care of that chore online, again at gf.nd.gov, or purchase a new one at various licensed vendors around the state. For Fred Reichman and the rest of the staff here at North Dakota Game and Fish, thanks for joining us for Outdoors Online. We'll see you again next week.